this is 20 British people that do not know each other, that have Bruce in common, all of whom are trying to be relatively cool and polite, right? The Brits bend anyone. You certainly don't want to kind of get people out of their comfort zone and be the excited guy, right? So we fly, we're all sitting on this kind of British Airways plane. Everyone's kind of relatively cool. We're picked up. It's quite late at night. I think we land at JFK at, I want to say 9 o'clock at night. And there's a bus waiting for us, and we're going to stay down in Asbury Park, right? At a big hotel in Asbury Park. So we'll get on the bus, and everyone's still being relatively formal and relatively polite. Come off the New Jersey Turnpike and come down into one of the main roads that takes you down towards Asbury Park. And someone shouts, look on the left, right? Stop the bus, you've got to stop the bus. So the bus driver pulls in at the side. And it's Bob's Big Boy Fried Chicken from Open All Night. I'm sitting on my lap, wiping the fingers on a Texaco road map, right? Bob's Big Boy Fried Chicken on the front seat. And then all hell breaks loose. Stories are coming out. Like, that was the moment that needed to happen for these 20 strange, weird English people that were in America to see Bruce Springsteen at no notice whatsoever. One of whom had just spent his entire year's student loan on this.
As I mentioned yesterday, Mark Dempsey and I's discussion was so much fun. We ended up talking over 3 hours. I've got it down to about 2 hours, so I split this into two parts. So here's the second half of me talking to Mark.
Let me cover a couple of things really
Please.
quickly. So I know you talked about top shows. So and you and I had kind of tweeted a couple of times recently about favorite albums. So my second favorite album is Tunnel of Love.
Okay.
It's just crafted. The storytelling, the characters, the musicianship, I think, is wonderful.
Yeah.
But my favorite album is The Ghost of Tom Joad.
Okay.
That is, if you kind of passed a law that said you can only keep one album for the rest of your life, I would select The Ghost of Tom Joad.
Okay.
I think that's an astonishing album. When I went to Broadway, so November 2nd, 2018, I did not know the set list. I had done everything I possibly could to avoid anything about the set list.
Got it.
I had seen from like a year earlier or 10 months earlier the core set list from night one, but I'd actually tried to put everything out of my mind. 3/4 of the way through, Bruce started talking about some of the civil unrest and some of the kind of dark spirits and worst parts of our characters that were happening, and how the US was getting itself into some trouble. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Oh my God, he's going to do The Ghost of Tom Joad."
Wow.
Which he then a couple of minutes later did. He makes me cry lots, Bruce. And so I spent most of The Ghost of Tom Joad in Broadway in tears. The song to me is one of the most powerful pieces of writing. The whole album is so powerful. And it goes back to my kind of love of the Americana. And I think The Ghost of Tom Joad, he presents Americana in such an incredibly different way. I adore it. And which brings me on to kind of top 5 shows. So probably Houston 2008 makes the top 5. We went out in 2003 on the Rising tour to the final couple of nights of the 10-night stand at East Rutherford Giant Stadium.
Yeah.
So we saw nights 9 and 10 in 2003, and night 9 was like just on fire, absolutely incredible. First time I'd ever seen Raise Your Hand. First time I'd ever seen Rosalita. The set list was just wild. So those nights 9 and 10 were both incredible to me, but night 9 stood out. And then probably a couple of surprising ones in kind of third position and second position. So I thought the rerun of the River Tour 2016, there was some very strong shows on that. We were living in
Absolutely.
we were living in Toronto at the time. So the first show that I saw on that Rising tour, on the River Tour was Toronto, which was very strong. Then we kind of saw some Northeast shows, Buffalo, Rochester. But I thought the very best show of that 2016 tour was Chicago the second time around. So we saw the August Chicago show. It went as close to 4 hours as you might as well say. It was a 4-hour show.
Right.
It opened with New York City Serenade. The power and the promise of the E Street Band were on full show, and the crowd was just going nuts from minute one till the end. Love that show. And then in second place was Vienna, Austria, 2009. So the Working on a Dream tour. And what's really interesting about that I just wanted to touch on, I've kind of learned to be a bit more critical of Bruce than I used to be, and acknowledge that not everything he does is, gold plated.
Sure.
I'm not a big fan of the Working on a Dream album. I think it's probably his worst album of his entire catalogue. I just didn't like the feel of it, the sound of it. I wasn't particularly bothered with the songwriting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bit surprising that probably in at number 2 on my list of all-time great concerts is Vienna 2009 from the Working on a Dream tour. Just magic happened that night. Vienna's not a city that you would choose to say was probably a big Bruce city. Austria isn't known for, a fan base that, goes nuts.
Yeah.
The show was outrageous. It was just outrageous. It had the first ever Jersey Girl played outside of the US.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. In response to a woman who had Jersey Girl on a T-shirt in the pit, she was kind of sitting up on someone's shoulders and had Jersey Girl on the T-shirt. And Bruce rather cheekily was like, well, give me the T-shirt and I'll play it. And good for her. She took the T-shirt off and spent the rest of the show in a bikini top. So he kind of had the Jersey Girl T-shirt and played Jersey Girl. That show was just outrageous. Proud Mary, they played as a request. Rendezvous played as a sign request. Growing Up, Sandy, just strong 70s song after strong 70s song. Great audience, great night. But then my favorite show of all time, and this is the story that I did want to get onto because it's just so important to me, was the Tower Theatre, Philadelphia.
Okay.
1995 on the Ghost of Tom Joad tour. And that's my favorite show of all time. So someone in a pit queue 10 years ago, someone said to me, hey, if you had a time machine, you could go back to one show, which show would you go back to? And without even batting an eyelid, I said, Philadelphia 95 Ghost of Tom Joad, which kind of floored everyone because most people would pick,
Sure,
an E Street Band show. And here's why that show is so important to me. Not the album is incredible, but I was at university at the time. So this was my second year at university. I think the Ghost of Tom Joad album came out over the summer. And I was just kind of starting the second year of university. So kind of this kind of time, early October 95. And I was a member of the British-based fan club. They're still going. I would love to think that someone from this fantastic group of people is listening to this at some point in the future. So a fan club called Badlands, right? Set up in the 80s by two brothers, Phil and Steve. Did an amazing job, and they were very progressive. They actually were really one of the first companies, if you like, that arranged for foreign travel to go and see Bruce abroad. Right? So I was a member, and I loved the Ghost of Tom Joad album already. And there was press at the time when the album was released. There was going to be no tour. This was not something that Bruce Springsteen was going to tour. It was one of those kind of surefire media releases that, this is just an album. It's kind of a concept. Don't expect shows. Mm-hmm. And certainly don't expect the E Street Band. And right. So I had kind of thought, well, I'm not going to see him. And the important piece of context here, back to the point that, we were not a wealthy family, right?
Right.
So I took 2 years out between leaving school and going to university to pay for myself to go to university. I was determined I was not going to take out student loans. I was determined I was not going to get into debt. I was going to take responsibility, do something for myself. So I worked for 2 years in some restaurants and some banks, just earning money, got myself to university in 94. Didn't take out student loans, all good. Comes to 1995, and I'm sitting in my kind of university residence in October 95. And I get a letter through the post because there's no email or internet, right?
Yeah.
Letter through the post from Badlands. Bruce Springsteen is going to play 10 shows to support the Ghost of Tom Joad, and we have got, I want to say 20 tickets, right? Probably best not to ask how they got them. That was kind of the rule back in those days.
Sure.
Right? We have got 20 tickets to see Bruce Springsteen at the Tower Theatre in Philadelphia on December the 8th, 1995. The first 10 or 20 people to call us can have one of the tickets, right? Now, there was quite some cost involved.
Sure.
Now, here's one of the most important points in my life, and certainly in my relationship with Bruce Springsteen, that you suddenly realize that Bruce comes first, right? Mm-hmm. He just comes first. I literally, before I had finished reading that letter, picked up the phone to Badlands and said, hey guys, it's Mark Dempsey. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
And they were like, great. Could we have the money in like the next 10 days? Because there was no automatic bank transfer and that kind of thing. You didn't just go onto an app and send them the money. I was like, sure. Here's just to, like how extreme this was. I hadn't yet got to the point in the letter that said how much this was going to cost.
Right.
And I was already telling them I was in.
Yeah.
So it's, I can't remember. I think it was like £1,400. It was because it was relatively late flights, right? It was December, so it was like Christmas.
Yeah.
Money, right? There was a hotel involved. We were going to stay in Asbury Park for 5 nights. So they were making it into this whole Springsteen trip. Yes, I'm in. Great, says one of them, right? Steve or Phil.
Yeah.
Could we have £1,400 in the next 10 days? I was like, not a problem. Put the phone down, walk down the street to the like the finance office of the university where I was at. And I walked, I was like, hello, could I have a student loan, please? And they were like, sure, what would you like your student loan for? I was like, well, I'm having some trouble paying my rent and books and I need, right? Because like legally you're allowed a student loan, right? Full stop.
Exactly.
You're allowed a student loan. I didn't feel it was sensible to say I'm going to fly to America in a month's time. I'm having some trouble paying my rent. I'm a little bit behind in, buying food, getting a bit worried. Yeah. What would you like? I was like, well, how much is available this year? Mm-hmm. And it was within like 50 quid of the thing. I was like, yes, please. I think it would be sensible if I took the full student loan. 2 years I worked to put myself through university and blew that entire psychological decision at 1 month's notice to fly to New Jersey to go and watch Bruce Springsteen. So I was all good. So jump forward to December. We fly, the 20 of us fly from Heathrow to JFK, landed JFK. This is my first time in the US. So remember how important like Americana was.
Sure.
Landed in JFK. And this is before the day where this was relatively commonplace, right? So now today, you or I might fly to a foreign country, right? And then you just chat shit with people, right? You just shoot the breeze, right? This is 20 British people that do not know each other, that have Bruce in common, all of whom are trying to be relatively cool and polite, right? The British don't want to offend anyone. You certainly don't want to kind of get people out of their comfort zone and be the excited guy, right? So we fly, we're all sitting on this kind of British Airways plane. Everyone's kind of relatively cool, right? We're picked up. It's quite late at night. I think we land at JFK at, I want to say 9 o'clock at night. Okay.
Right.
And there's a bus waiting for us and we're going to stay down in Asbury Park, right? At a big hotel in Asbury Park. So we'll get on the bus and everyone's still being relatively formal and relatively polite.
Yeah.
Come off the New Jersey Turnpike and come down into one of the main roads that takes you down towards Asbury Park. And someone shouts, look on the left, right? stop the bus, you've got to stop the bus. So the bus driver pulls in at the side, and it's Bob's Big Boy Fried Chicken from Open All Night.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sitting on my lap.
Right.
She's wiping her fingers on a Texaco road map. Right.
Yeah.
Bob's Big Boy Fried Chicken on the front seat. And then all hell breaks loose. Stories are coming out. Like, that was the moment that needed to happen.
That broke it. Like,
right?
oh,
For these 20 strange, weird English people that were in America to see Bruce Springsteen at no notice whatsoever, one of whom had just spent his entire year's student loan on this. Others who were literally skiving off work, hoping they weren't going to get fired, right?
Yeah.
And then all the stories come out. So we check into the Barclay Carteret Hotel in Asbury Park, December the 6th, 1995. And then the next 2 days, bless them, the guys at Badlands had put on a trip. Like, we went to the Stone Pony to see a band. We did a walk on the boardwalk, saw Madame Marie, like all the things that you would do.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. So then the second or the third night, bus comes, takes us down to Philadelphia. And I don't know if you've been to the Tower Theatre or you know the reference, but this is a tiny, old style, like 1900s radio theatre.
Okay.
It's, I don't know if it even holds as many people as the Broadway Theatre held,
Okay.
right? I think it held 1,000 people. Someone out there is going to know it maybe held 1,500, right? Take into account, my only point of reference so far is 2 shows at Wembley Arena, 15,000 people, and a show in a field with 60,000 people. So we pull up outside the venue, and the guy from Badlands has the tickets, and he's like, guys, like, there's like 1,000 people in this venue. This is going to be incredible. Here's your tickets. By the way, the tickets are, we got like a clump of tickets at the back. Don't any of you expect to be in the front row, right? These are probably the worst tickets. We called in some favors from someone we know who's on the crew, right? But we're in.
Yeah.
So we get off the bus. All I want to do is go and sit in my seat and think about what I'm about to see, right? That's all I want to do. I grab a tour t-shirt that I still have to this day, and I go and sit in my seat. Don't ask me why. Everyone else goes to the bar. So I go and take my seat, and I am literally, not to sound ungrateful, in the worst seat in the venue.
Right.
Top tier, back right, not behind a pillar to the fact where I can't see the stage, but literally up against a pillar, right?
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm sitting there watching Kevin Buell start to bring out the guitars, tinkering with 12-string guitars, tuning them up. I am in my element. There's me and kind of 3 or 4 other people milling around. And you'll guess where this story is going quite quickly. So this guy comes up to me, comes up the steps of the top tier, says, "Oh, you got a bit of a shitty seat there." And I'm like, I'm good. Don't worry. I've come 8,000 miles, and I'm complete. This is going to be an amazing show. I love the album. And he's like, "Oh, you've come 8,000 miles?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm from England."
Yeah.
Wow. He said, what are you doing over here? And I'm like, well, I've spent a couple of days in Asbury Park touring around and wanted to come and see the show. I said, there's no European tour. And at that point, there still was no plan for like a European tour, right? This was the 10 shows of the tour. And I said, I couldn't miss this. I still don't know what he's about to do. And so he pulls out his like backstage lanyard, says, "Oh, well, I'm with the crew." He said, "You've got a bit of a shitty seat there." He said, "But you said you were here with some other people."
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I didn't say that. I'm here by myself. And he's like, "Oh, good, because I've got a ticket for you." He's like, you haven't got friends here or anything? I'm like, no, I'm here by myself.
Yeah.
He's like, "That's great. We've had like a cancellation from like a VIP down the front, so I'm going to give you a ticket down the front." And I'm like, "What, at the front of this balcony section?" He's like, no, the front row. I'm like, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
He's like, "There's a load of people outside that would die for your seat, so we're going to give someone lucky your seat. Would you mind going down to the front row?" It's like, Jesus. Yes, I will. I mean, I was literally front center, and all thought of, have I done the right thing blowing my student loan on this trip suddenly is
Yeah.
completely
Yeah,
ruined.
exactly.
Now that is entirely secondary to the fact that this show blew my mind. This was the greatest concert I have ever seen. I probably still put it ahead of Broadway.
Wow.
And it's the talking, Jesse, that he talked before, I think, every song bar two, right?
Yeah.
And to hear Bruce talk about the inspirations, the how he made the album. He'd read a couple of books, and he talked about the books he'd read. He talked about some of the people he'd met. There was a mix of lighthearted and unbelievably serious, and in a way that I still think only Bruce can really pull off in a show.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen other great shows. You've seen other great shows. You were at Just Kiss. You were at Kiss last night, right? There are other people. I've seen Garth Brooks a few times. Garth Brooks is incredible, right?
Right.
He doesn't tell stories and take you on this roller coaster of emotion, right? He just plays amazingly great country music, amazingly well, and has a blast and takes you on this journey of fun, right? Garth Brooks is incredible. I love the Hold Steady. I go and see the Hold Steady an awful lot, right? The Hold Steady produce great concerts. No one takes you on this roller coaster the way Bruce does. And that show, that Philadelphia Goes to Tom Joad show, was a roller coaster. There was talk of death, sadness. There was moments of absolute hilarity when he was talking about the effects of drug use before does this bus stop at 82nd Street, right? He talked about politics. There was something going on with, I mean, I knew nothing of this reference point, but there was something going on with Newt Gingrich at the time, like late 95. I think he was maybe speaker at the time.
Yeah.
I may have that wrong. You may want to cut that or check that. But Bruce talked about Newt Gingrich, right? About this weird thing that was going on at the time and how he wanted his politics to become clearer and clearer. Mm-hmm. To me, it was incredibly important to hear him now starting to talk about the political element and the political environment. Just an incredible show. Incredible show. I got the set list from the stage, shook his hand at the end. And that show is the show I go back to. That if you gave me the time machine, I'm going to that show, and I still don't regret blowing £1,400 of my student loan that took me about 7 years to pay off.
So my second show ever was the Devils and Dust show.
Oh, wow. Was it really?
Yeah, yes. I had gone, my first show was a Rising show, and I told the story often on the podcast that I felt like I'd gone into a movie halfway through the plot. And so, because I had never seen Bruce, but I knew I loved what I heard. So he's coming, Devils and Dust. I go to Linda, who's my wife, and I go, I really want to go see him again. Do you care? No, I don't care. I have no interest in going. Okay. So I had listened to Devils and Dust nonstop, just on repeat. So I get into the venue. It's they called it the Verizon Center back then. They've now changed it, but small, intimate theater. And there's a lower level and a balcony. I'm at the lower level. I am at the very last row. And to my right is the aisle. To my left is a pillar.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I have that seat. There is no one next to me. And so I'm there, and this guy comes up to me and says, do you want a better seat? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Because I'm thinking that it's a scalper. And so as he's walking off, I go, wait a minute. I'm in the building.
Yeah.
This isn't a scalper. So I stand up and I walk up and I go, excuse me, do you still have seats? He goes, oh yeah, sure. He says, here, just go on back, go down there. So I was not first row, but I was row 4 or 5.
Fantastic.
And you will get this reference. In fact, you will one of the few people do. My seats were better than Babe Laufenberg's, but not as good as Moose Johnston's, as Daryl Johnston's. And in fact they said moose when Daryl was coming in.
Did they really?
Yes, they did. And I know people who weren't sports fans are like, why are they saying no, it's Bruce, not
Yeah, yeah,
Moose?
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was Daryl Johnston. So exactly the same. That's why I and that's right. The point is not to overtell your story, but just to share. It was amazing. I was like, I could not believe how lucky I was
So
that I
that's
got
fantastic.
this. Yeah,
It's fantastic.
yeah, it's
Fantastic.
just great. Um, we've been going almost 2 hours, so
Okay.
what? Before we get to the Mary question, is there anything else that I need to ask you, or do we just book you on a second show down the road?
Well, okay. We don't need to do a second show, although this has been just a blast, Jesse. It's just a pleasure.
Well, what we need to do is, depending on how well our Cowboys do or how poorly, we should
Sure.
have a wrap up of the season. So
We should. So there's one thing I absolutely want to just talk about really briefly, and
sure,
the very question, and I know there's a kind of a chance for a wrap up, and I just want
yeah,
to say one very specific thing. So look, let
okay,
me briefly say this.
okay,
So my wife and I moved to Canada in December 2011.
okay,
We knew no one. Bruce quickly tours, right? There's a tour in 2012. We went to some shows. He came to Toronto, played at the big baseball stadium in Toronto. When I say we were numbers 1 and 2 into the pit, I'm not exaggerating anywhere. We
okay,
won the lottery. And that was our kind of, maybe we were meant to move here moment, not
yeah,
to kind of overblow it, but like we were 1 and 2 in the pit
yeah.
in a show in a country that we had only lived in for 6 months at that time.
That's awesome.
And there was then, about a year later, someone who has become, he will be a lifelong, very best friend of mine.
Okay,
He was the manager at the Hard Rock Cafe in Toronto. And he put a note on Backstreets. I'm sure you're familiar with like the Backstreets fan page that said, I want to set up an open mic night at the Hard Rock Cafe in Toronto.
Okay.
For Bruce Springsteen fans. And the Hard Rock Cafe in Toronto is in this unbelievable old venue. So the restaurant is in the downstairs. Then they own they had like a sound stage up on the top floor.
Okay.
You could access from the Hard Rock Cafe. They would use it for like overspills or parties. And they had a full sound stage there. And if you look up, but people can look this up like offline after this. But it's where Bob Dylan met some members of the band.
Oh, wow.
Joni Mitchell was signed to her first to her first contract there. There's myriad stories of rock and roll history that happened in this building.
Okay.
And there was this soundstage up there, and this note comes on Backstreets about, we should use this. Why don't we set a date and people just come along and bring their guitar and we'll just have a go. And it might suck, and that's fine. And we might have a blast, and that's great. So my wife and I had this rule when we moved to Canada. We're just going to say yes to stuff, right? Why not? Nothing illegal, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We're just going to say yes to stuff. That's the only way we're going to get stuff out of this. So I replied to James, that I now know, and said, yeah, I'm in. All right, I'll see you. It was kind of early 2014, I think it was set for. I'll bring my guitar and be ready to play a couple of songs. We'll see you there. I got in from work that night, walk in, said to my wife, we're going to a Bruce Springsteen event at the Hard Rock Cafe next month. And she's like, fantastic, that's great. I said, yeah, it's like an open mic. She's like, that's wonderful. We'll go along to that. I was like, and I'm playing. And she said, well, then we'd better get rehearsing. Now, I can play the guitar. I didn't know if I could sing or not.
Right.
Since the age of 11 or 12, I've had guitars and I've known how to play Bruce Springsteen songs. I've got chord books and things. And I got pretty good on the guitar. So we went through a litany of songs that I thought might be good for me to play. And the note said, everyone come ready with like 2 or 3 songs, see what we can do. Let's see how much time we got. So we I played song after song, and my life was like, no, 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 try that one in a different key.
Yeah.
No, right. And we settled on three. We settled on Devils and Dust, Fire, and the Fire, like the version from the Bridge School Benefit '86
Yeah.
that I referenced with Nils's kind of tapping on the fingerboard,
and
Sherry Darling, like a fun, so a serious song and a couple of lights on.
Sure.
And I practiced them and practiced them and practiced them and practiced. So jump forward a month, we turn up at the Hard Rock Cafe, walk in, hey, we're here for the open mic, go upstairs, and there's 15 people. And I think 7 or 8 are going to play some songs, and they've all brought their wife or their partner.
Yeah.
And there's James, who has set this whole thing up. And I don't want to come on here and give shout outs to all the people I've met at Bruce Springsteen concerts, but he and I will remain lifelong friends.
Sure.
I cannot tell you how grateful I am to him for this, because I met people that day and then continued to meet people at that venue that inspired me. We got to talk about music. That we kind of, long story short, that turned into another couple of open mic nights where people turned up and kind of had some more songs to play. Then it went from being about, well, okay, we've done a few Bruce Springsteen nights. Let's do I think Bob Dylan was next. And then we did a Tom Petty night. And then from there, suddenly you're meeting all of these new people. We met Canadians that we would never have met without this Bruce Springsteen event. We met people that are now lifelong friends to us that we would never have met without this Bruce Springsteen event.
That's awesome.
It's unbelievable. It speaks to, I mean, the kindness and the welcomeness of Canadians is kind of a little bit of a cliche and a given. It's true, right?
Yeah.
We've never been made more welcome anywhere. But the kindness and the welcomeness of Springsteen fans to, let's try and do this because we all love his music. It was the coming together of several absolutely critical things for us. We ended up becoming like, we became like kind of 7 or 8 of us became like a house band at the Hard Rock Cafe.
Oh, how funny.
Oh my God, I can't even, it's probably the greatest thing I've ever been involved in. And it morphed into, again, this is all James's idea.
Yeah.
We actually started, and we did it, I think, 3 years in a row. For St. Patrick's Day, we put together a Seeger Sessions cover band.
Oh, how fun.
And played on St. Patrick's Day at the Hard Rock Cafe and a couple of other like local venues. And learned the entire Seeger Sessions album, start to finish. We put out a note on like Craigslist and that kind of stuff for a banjo player, for a trumpet player, for a steel guitar player, and found them and taught them how to play the songs, right? So there was like 7 or 8 of us who were Springsteen fans, James and I and another couple of just really great musicians, some of who were actually semi-professional or professional musicians as their day jobs, kind of split the singing and the guitar playing between us. And then we went and found a drummer, trumpet player, right? We never found a tuba player. That was the one missing beat. We never got the tuba, and we tried for 3 years.
Right.
And we played this. I think we did it 6 or 7 times after my wife and I moved back to the UK. They carried on doing it, kept it going. We literally were a Seeger Sessions cover band, and until the day I die, Jesse, if I live to be 100, I'll never have more fun.
Oh, I can imagine. That's just that's greatness.
I got to be Bruce.
God,
right?
that's very nice.
I sang on Jesse James. I sang on Erie Canal. I sang on Pay Me My Money Down and American Land. I got to be Bruce 10 times.
Do you have any recordings of it?
Probably it might be on YouTube. I don't know. That's a great question. I'd never thought. We've got, my wife's filmed some stuff. Right? I don't know if it was. I don't think it was properly recorded.
Okay.
That coming together of everything. Of I need to experience something new. I would like to play live music. I need to go and live in a foreign country. Bruce pulled that all together.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, if you could find a link or have your wife send me, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, that is such a great story. I love that you shared that, and I love that community, right? That
That's the
how
word.
it brought it
That's the
in.
word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just awesome. All right,
That's
so if you're a friend of Mark's, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. This is probably your first one you listen to us. I end every show with the Mary question. So, give you a little background. Jay Armstrong is a recently retired English teacher. But when he was teaching in the Philadelphia area, he would spend 2 days of his honors English class, the senior class, breaking down Thunder Road. They would go through all the lyrics. They would talk about the imagery that Bruce uses. They would talk about the themes of the song. They treat this as a poem. They compare it to Robert Frost. And at the end of the 2 days, he asks his class, does Mary get in the car at the end of the song? So, Mark, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car?
So my very first answer to this, when I thought about it, was who wouldn't?
Right.
Who would not get in that car? And then I realized that the characters Bruce writes about are generally very conflicted, confused, ambiguous, complex characters that would find reasons to say no.
Right.
And I don't want to be guilty of overthinking this.
No, that you cannot be guilty of that. That is the whole purpose of the question.
And I think I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Because not everyone chooses to escape.
Yes.
And not everyone chooses to go. And not everyone chooses to be brave. I'd love to think she does, and I don't think she did.
Okay. Very nice. That's good.
It's a great question. It's a really, really great question.
Yeah. You had shared with me before we started recording, you had not listened to any episodes because you didn't want to have any, sway. About 60-40. 60% say yes, about 40% say no.
Okay.
So you are not necessarily in that big of a minority. That's good. Mark, this has been amazing. I appreciate your time, and you can tell your lovely bride that I wanted to hear all the stories. If someone wants to reach you, how can they? What's the best way to get you?
Well, I guess in this world we live in, Twitter, I guess.
Right. Okay.
So I guess you'll probably put this up on Twitter and with my handle, as I guess the kids call it. So feel free if anyone wants to reach out.
MKD 1973, right?
Yeah, MKD at 1973. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Any final thoughts you want to share?
I did prepare one thing, and I appreciate we've probably gone way over time, but that message I gave, or the thing I said about coming full circle, I kind of wanted to. My mum died a long time ago. Hideously young. And I remember two very specific things about her and my relationship with Bruce. Number one, I've already told you about remembering the thing about dancing in the dark. When I went to university, I went to university in 94. My mum died in 2002. So it's been 20 years since she passed away. When I went to university, I kind of really surprised her with the information. I did this all by myself. Like I say, I wanted to kind of take responsibility and do something grown up. So she only had like 2 months notice I was going to university. And I guess most parents are involved in that process for several years, right?
Right.
She was really quite shocked. Didn't, of course, try to talk me out of it, but didn't have very long to prepare. And she sent me to university on day one. She took me there and left me a card. There was some money in there, which is great, and some guidance and some ideas, and like just a letter from a mum to a son, right?
Yeah.
She finished it with a Bruce Springsteen quote. Now, she wasn't that bothered about Bruce. She always said that she loved how much joy he brought me, and she didn't really care for his songs more than, a passing maternal instinct, interest. She always used to tell me her favorite song was Bridge of Sighs, because she thought Brilliant Disguise was called Bridge of Sighs. Right.
I love that. Okay.
Right. So Here's the quote. She had clearly kind of gone into all my albums or into my guitar chord books, and found, with the little time that she had to do this line. And it's me, and I'd never noticed it was me. So let the game start. You'd better run, you little wild heart. From The Price You Pay.
Wow.
And I was like, Jesus, that's his line about me.
Yeah.
It's not about me. Clearly, it's not about me. But that's his line about me, and my mum found it, and I didn't. And that was what she thought of me through his words. So I thought I'd finish.
That's
I
beautiful.
thought I'd finish with that.
That's beautiful. That's good. How emotional was The Wish on Broadway?
Oh, don't even.
Your mom.
No. You can't even start me on that. Well,
yeah,
you have. So, my mum died of cancer, and when I found out she had cancer, of course I sent her flowers, and in the card, I'm not going to remember the exact line under pressure like this. In the card, I put the line from The Wish, which was along the lines of, funny old world where one boy's dreams come true, but I've got one more wish, and this one is just for you.
Yes.
Wow, I made it through that without crying. That's quite good.
Yes.
So there is literally a Bruce Springsteen lyric for every moment in your life.
There is.
And actually, now I'm thinking about it, we had If I Should Fall Behind Red at our wedding. We had You're Missing played at my mum's funeral. But that line from The Wish, I put that in the card when I sent her flowers after I found out she had cancer. So, geez, Bruce, like, if he doesn't provide a line for every single moment of your life, it's just beyond me.
Perfect. Mark, this has been amazing. I appreciate all the time. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself. I will have you on again. If nothing else, we're going to do a post Cowboy season talk. Thank you. Listeners, you please be safe. Go get vaccinated. Remember to do the right things. Wear your mask. Remember to social distance, and let's be all good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, listeners, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts, as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts, as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.
Good job, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesse. That was so much fun. You do this so well. I now feel bad I haven't kind of listened to any in the past, but I'm gonna be a very avid listener in the future. But I'm glad I didn't let anything skew me or steer me away. I didn't want to kind of steer away from stories just because they were similar to other stories.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you didn't, and they weren't. They were unique. People are nervous when they start, and within 10 or 15 minutes, they just forget that we're being recorded and they're just having fun talking.
You've I don't know what you do for your job. I wouldn't be at all surprised if you were some kind of like facilitator or coach.
Yeah.
Because the way you kept this, I mean, it feels like we've been talking for 15 minutes, and it also feels like we've known each other our entire lives.
Yeah.
I'm really very grateful that you had me on to do this, and I've genuinely enjoyed it. I mean, you did a great job. It might seem like you haven't done very much other than ask a few questions, but you're like the way you kind of even gesticulate and facially.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Did a great job.
I appreciate that. Very nice. Yeah. I manage a contact center. That's what I've been doing for like 30 years. Is I'm customer service, inbound call centers.
Okay.
Yeah. So but a big part of my job is being a leader and managing people. So yeah.
Hey Jesse.
Yeah.
That final thing that Chris just said about never leave a Bruce concert early. So one final funny story for you. So I went to see Bruce again in Philadelphia. So at the very, very start of the Magic tour. So 2007, October 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were the second and third nights of the tour. They played in like Hartford and then 2 nights in Philly.
Yeah.
October 2007. And Magic's one of my absolute favorite albums.
Absolutely.
I over-invested in shows that tour. We went to, I think, 15 shows that tour. And I was at the 2 Philadelphia shows at the very start of the arena tour in October 2007. The first night was fine, right? It was very early in the tour and the pacing was a little bit off, and it was fine. The second night was absolutely on fire. And I was right in the pit, right down the front. And about 3/4 of the way through, they moved Patty's microphone from like stage left to the right at the center with Bruce. And this is like, she only did it 2 or 3 times on that tour, but she had a single out at the time called Town Called Heartbreak.
Right.
Do you remember anyone telling this story?
No, please.
Right. So in those first very, very early Magic shows, 3 or 4 times they played a song called Town Called Heartbreak. And it was a Patti Scialfa song. And they moved her to the middle of the stage and she and Bruce duetted. It's not a great song. It's fine, right? I liked the fact that I saw it because we saw Bruce and the E Street Band do a Patti song, right? That's quite nice. I'm not kidding. This was Philadelphia. This was hardcore Springsteen fan, right? They should have been losing their minds for it. I would suggest, what was it? The Wachovia Center, right? Holds maybe 20,000 people. I'm not kidding. About 10,000 people chose that moment to go for their bathroom break, right? It's the most disrespectful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, I try and get set lists from as many shows as I can. I fail normally because everyone's trying to get a set list.
Sure.
I got the set list from this night, right? The set list went entirely to plan up until that point, A Town Called Heartbreak. Next on the set list after A Town Called Heartbreak was Working on the Highway and Bobby Jean, right? Those were the next 2 listed songs. Bruce was so incensed by what happened. At the end of Town Called Heartbreak, I saw him mouth to himself, and he went around every member of the band and they played Incident on 57th Street. And literally 10,000 people came running back to their seats and missed the first 2 minutes of Incident on 57th Street. And the band were laughing. I mean, they played Incident on 57th Street laughing at what had just happened.
That is a great story.
That was, look it up. Like
I will.
Like, if you look on, like, I looked a couple of days later at what was being said on Backstreets about Town Called Heartbreak. Yeah. It's not a great song, but I'm not going to boo and walk out and go, right? And Bruce was incensed. You could I was so close to him. You could see he was incensed. And he actually said,
oh, that's great. Yeah, that's perfect.